Today we're going out to find bittersweet vine to help some trees. For example, right here in the background, help some trees not get pulled down. And this is what is required of our future to be able to maintain structural integrity of our local ecosystems, because it is clear that the public management plans are surely overwhelmed by the vast responsibility required to manage such things. So my very first video, it's raining. Certainly it would probably be an iconic video, but I want to say that as someone who studied environmental studies in college in Arizona, primarily desert and desert plants, looking and updating currently with what the invasive species are in the Midwest, it's quite significant, and there's a lot to learn in regards to what these species are. But even in this little local pod of forest in the farmland, we have this rose species that is an invasive species. And what I have noticed in my region, central Michigan, is that there has been a rapid increase in vines pulling trees down. A significant increase in thorn-based species like this wild rose, the different types of invasive thistles. That the forest itself has become, it's transitioning into an unmanaged forest. So what do I mean by managed? How is a forest managed? Naturally, a forest is managed by wildfire. It's also traditionally exist remote from other species coming in. So with human transportation and how we have brought species from remote island locations all around the world, geographical regions, to a new landscape, some of these species are particularly successful because there are no natural resistances that have, let's say, developed alongside them. And that is where we, as stewards, are required to identify and essentially be the tool, the mechanism for the forest to help it manage itself. And this is a role that Native American cultures would have provided historically, because they would observe their natural landscape that surrounded them, and they would see that there's a certain species that seems to be either out competing or some species emit chemicals in the soil itself which discourage other plants from growing nearby them, like creosote in the desert's one clear example. And if those other species that depend upon the forest for their subsistence and well-being and promoting the diversity, the unique arrangement of different species that have traditionally existed within an area, that we lose the forest in a way to itself. And that is why we're here. This plant here is this is the Oriental BitterSweet, and it primarily goes from ground structure up the edge of forest and will work into the forest. So it doesn't do well in the shadows, but it inevitably transfers itself into the canopy, pulling down all the trees that are there and essentially making an untraversable, I would call it a wasteland. as you can see, going after these vines during the summertime is a lot of work. And you know what, this is going to be a learning process for me and everyone else who happens to be watching this. It's going to be a series of evolutions between figuring out what's the right way to do things. But I opened up this part of the forest, about like 15 minutes of work, 20 minutes of work, over to another section of the forest where I cleared all these vines out in the winter time. And it is much easier. They don't have their tendrils wrapped around as many of the branches because they dry out. And we'll go over there and we'll see how few there actually are. And that's kind of the steps, you know. It's not like, it's just a little bit at a time. It's like right there, I put a little dent in their ability to push into, in how far they push within the season. This is the forest the section of forest I spoke about earlier where I came in and cleared out the vines in the winter time. And now I'm back 2 years later. I didn't trim them this winter. And I see that they have grown. Last season's vines did grow a little bit more than I probably prefer. But one thing I will say is that if I did not intervene in that one season, it's likely that many of these jack pines and these larger trees that surround me would have been or could have been pulled down. But here you can see there's a pretty thick vine in there. It's interesting too to think of what are some of the vines that I missed a few years ago that are now these really thick ones today. But most of the work that I did was back in here. Alright, so I'm going to go back in here. And you can see that these pine trees do not have the vines on them like those ones that tree did up front. And that is what the difference of a few hours can make in the middle of the winter. Going outside going somewhere with a pair of loppers or an axe like here. So here's one that I missed. I'll try to cut it while I'm here, since everything's with this rain is so wet. It's not really working real well, but I'll do what I can. Those two are just broken. Those two are broken. A couple back here.
Thank you for joining me today. Follow me for updates at ancientrefuge.com or Ancient Refuge on Facebook. Check description for links. Bye.